Hello, everyone. I think we're about ready to get started. My name is Katie Post. I'm from the Association of American Medical Colleges, and I'm here to talk to you about the AMCAS application. AMCAS stands for the American Medical College Application Service and is the centralized application for applying to medical school. I'm going to talk a little bit about how AMCAS works. We'll go over the application timeline and those deadline dates that you should be aware of. We'll talk about the application itself, and I'll go into each of the sections that you'll be expected to fill out. We'll also cover what happens after you submit your application, because there are a lot of information that you need to know about what happens next. And then at the end, I'll talk about some tools and resources that we have for you to help navigate this application process, because although it's not difficult per se, it's very detailed. So we have some tools and resources to help you out. All right, so how does AMCAS work? AMCAS works when you submit one online application to us. We verify all the information that you enter into that application by comparing it to what we see on your official transcripts. You'll send us your official transcripts from all of the schools that you've attended at a post-secondary level, and we'll make those comparisons on a line-by-line basis just to make sure everything is true and accurate. Then, once that application's been verified, we'll send it to each and every medical school that you choose to apply to. You can apply to up to 143 different programs with AMCAS if you so choose, so there are a lot of options. AMCAS also calculates your AMCAS GPA, which is a standardized GPA for you, so that way medical schools can compare your GPA to someone's GPA who went to school in a completely different state. After schools get those verified applications, they'll start their own review processes, which will include secondary applications for you and in-person interviews. This is a screenshot of the AMCAS homepage. You can find anything and everything you want to know about AMCAS on our website. That's www.aamc.org/AMCAS. Sign-in for the actual application is always up in this upper corner here, and you'll see that button to log into the application. On our page, we also have links to other resources that the association provides, number one being that MCAT exam, which is an important part of your application process. Number two is the fee assistance program. The application process to medical school is quite expensive, so the AAMC offers the fee assistance program, which I'll talk a little bit about later on in the presentation. We also have a bunch of AMCAS resources, as I mentioned earlier, and we'll go over those towards the end of the presentation as well. So, who uses the AMCAS application? The AMCAS application is for MD programs. Again, we have 143 different schools and programs that participate in AMCAS. Schools that don't use AMCAS are Texas public schools. Everyone else who offers you an MD uses AMCAS. AMCAS also offers a letters of evaluation service, so we collect your letters of evaluation and send them to the schools that you apply to. So we do that for all but 2 of our schools, and we also run criminal background checks for a number of our schools as well, which I will talk about again later. Let's talk about the timeline. So you should know that the AMCAS process works a year ahead of the current calendar year. For example, it's 2014 right now, but we are in the 2015 AMCAS cycle. This is because this year's application, AMCAS 2015, is for those who wish to start medical school in 2015. The application process is a bit extensive. It's almost a year and a half to apply to medical school, so it's a good thing to look forward and plan on when you want to start med school and work backwards from there. Our application opens at the beginning of May every year. You'll be able to log in, start entering your information, work on it for about a month, because you're not able to submit your application until early June. We open submission in early June every year, and then again there'll be about a month of time where we'll start verifying applications before we'll send that data to medical schools. So at the end of June, we'll send verified applications to med schools, and they'll start their own review processes, which again include those secondary applications and in-person interviews. Deadlines for the AMCAS application fall between September and December usually. However, you should know that medical school admissions are on a rolling basis, which means that it's a good idea to submit your application as early as you can, as early as you have a strong, complete application. The trends that we've been seeing lately have been more and more applicants are submitting earlier in the summer just to try to get their application seen by medical schools first. You should also know about the early decision program. If you are convinced that one medical school is right for you and you think that you would be accepted to that school, you think you match their applicant profile well, and really want to go for one option, then you might want to consider the early decision program. It works much like it does for undergrad schools. If you are accepted, it's a binding acceptance, so you'll be going to that school, but you'll also know that you're accepted by the beginning of October, so you'll have a bit of free time while other people who are applying might be stressing out a little bit. But again, make sure that that's the right choice for you. Your application will be released if you're not accepted into early decision, but that release will happen in October. This is just kind of an overview of the timeline of the process. Again, we provide resources updated every year, so those will come out in April. The application opens in May, and then you can start submitting it in June. Secondary applications you'll start receiving once med schools start getting AMCAS applications, your AMCAS application. That generally starts in June and goes throughout the summer. Summer and early fall is also when you'll expect to hear back if they'd like you to come interview with them. And then in the spring of the next year, you'll hear about decisions. It's important to understand what deadline means to AMCAS. Deadline means that your application is submitted on that deadline date. It doesn't have to be verified by that deadline date. It's important for those of you on the West Coast to understand that AMCAS operates on East Coast time. We're located in Washington, D.C., so we operate on the East Coast time. If you're planning on submitting on those deadline dates, make sure to set your clocks forward, because if you submit Pacific Coast time, can't really help you out. AMCAS must receive all of your required transcripts within 2 weeks of when you submit your application. And we also do not grant deadline extensions. So if that would be something that you'd be struggling with, then that'd be something you talk to the schools about, but we don't do any of the deadline extensions. Again, I will continue to say that as early as possible is better, so don't try to leave it to the last minute to submit your application. You should be aware that medical school secondary deadlines are different than their AMCAS deadlines. They really depend on school, so make sure to keep track of each application that you've submitted, where you are in the process with different schools. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the application itself. There are 9 sections of the application, and we'll go through each one in a bit of detail. Some of them are pretty self-explanatory, but again, this isn't complicated information. It's about yourself, but it is detailed. So you want to give yourself time to do this correct, and don't try to rush through it in an afternoon, because that will not be a fun experience for you. This is the main menu of the application. You can see the parts of the application in that middle section and then along the top row up there. The buttons on the side will be activated once you've entered specific information into the application. For example, after you submit your application, you'll see an update application button become active on the side there if you need to make any changes. The details link on the side will give you information about the status of your application, whether or not we're verifying it at the moment, if we've received your letters or your transcripts. You'll also see in that middle column, completed. That says incomplete if we're missing information from you in that section. So we won't let you submit an application if we're requiring specific info from you. The first section is identifying information, and this section is actually pre-populated with much of the information that you entered when you registered for a AAMC ID. AAMC IDs are provided to you once you register for the MCAT exam or apply to the fee assistance program. If you haven't done either of those, then it's very easy. You can register when you sign into AMCAS, but this ID is important. It's important to keep it one ID only. This is because we use this ID to connect your application to your MCAT score, so you wouldn't want your scores to miss your application. So make sure you have one ID. The schools attended section is where you'll enter information about every post-secondary school that you've attended. This is also the section where you'll determine which transcripts that we need. AMCAS requires almost all transcripts that you have. However, if you have study abroad experience, we don't accept foreign transcripts, so you won't be submitting those to us. But this part of the application will walk you through that determination for each school that you've entered into the schools attended section. The third section is biographic information, and that is one of the more self-explanatory parts of the application. It's just really to get your contact information and a bit more about your background. Coursework. So coursework is the part of the application that generally takes applicants the longest. We ask you to enter information, pretty detailed information, about each class you have ever attempted at a post-secondary institution, regardless of whether or not you've earned credit. We'll ask you information about your credit earned and the grade, obviously. You will indicate special course types, so whether or not this was a pass-fail class or whether a lab was associated with your class, you'll enter that information into this section. Again, this does usually take people the longest to complete. On average, people enter about 52 courses from 2 to 3 schools. So this takes some time. One thing that we really strongly recommend is that you request an official transcript for yourself while you fill out this section of the application. That's because sometimes your unofficial transcript is slightly different than your official transcript. So if you're entering information from your unofficial transcript and we see your official, we're going to be needing to make way more corrections than if you were doing it off of your official transcript. This will just slow down your verification a bit and can create some confusion, so we just suggest that you request an official transcript for yourself as well. All right. Number 5 is work and activities. This is where you'll have the chance to share with medical schools all of the things that you do outside of the classroom, your extracurriculars, your work experience. This is where you get to kind of explain or show how you have differentiated yourself as an applicant. You'll be able to enter up to 15 different experiences in this section of the application. It's important to remember that you don't need to have 15. If you do 7 things outside of school that you do really well, and this is what you do, you don't need to fill in those extra spaces just because, we don't want you to put in knitting or I like to ride my bike just to add substance to those, this part of the application. It's really about quality. What makes you a good applicant? How has this impacted your choice to become a doctor? You'll be able to indicate if these experiences were repeated experiences. So, for example, if you have a summer job that you've done for 4 summers in a row, you can enter it once and then indicate that it was repeated, and this will allow you to use 1 spot rather than 4. Sometimes people call us and say, I am very active in my school, I'm a pre-med student, and I'm really, I do so many other things. I have way more than 15 activities on my plate. And again, we're going to tell you quality over quantity. That's what medical schools are looking for. So choose which ones reflect you the best. In this section, you'll also be able to designate 3 entries as your most meaningful experiences. These most meaningful experiences are really, again, what set you apart, what really influenced your decision to become a doctor, and you'll have a bit more space to expand upon that in writing. For each entry, you'll have like a sentence or 2 explanation of what you did, but for the most meaningful, there'll be a bit more. This is kind of the text box for the most meaningful. It's really not that long, but a little bit more information. The 6th section of the application is the letters of evaluation section. This is where you're going to enter information about the people who are writing letters of evaluation on your behalf. Most people have about 2 or 3 letters. However, we allow you to enter up to 10 letter entries. This is so that you can tailor specific letters to specific programs if you so choose. You're allowed to designate which letters will go to which schools. However, most people have general letters that could apply to any program. However, say for example, you are very close with a doctor or dean or something at a school and they want to write you a letter of recommendation, you could tailor that to just go to that school. So the other places you apply don't see that as well. One thing I want to make very clear is that AMCAS does not need your letters to verify your application. We don't look at your letters. We don't verify that they're true. These letters, I mean, you could submit a letter on a napkin to AMCAS, and we would send that to the schools. We don't need that for the verification process, so don't wait on your letter writers to submit your application. Sometimes letter writers don't finish their letters until midsummer, and you've just been waiting for them until you submit your application. You can submit way before then. AMCAS does not have requirements for letters. Medical schools do. Most schools request that they are on official letterhead and bear the signature of the author. You'd be surprised by how many calls we get saying, my letter writer forgot to sign the letter. So it's often nice to put in a gentle reminder to make sure that they sign it. The 7th section is medical school designations. So this is where you'll pick which schools you want to apply to. Once you make a selection, you'll see more information about their participation in the AMCAS letter service and the criminal background checks pop up. You'll also see their program deadline dates and the transcript deadline that they have. The 8th section is the essay section. So this is where you're going to put your personal statement or your essay about why you want to pursue a medical education. You'll have 5,300 characters to write this essay. That's about a page, a little over a page. We recommend that you type directly into this text box because if you copy and paste from Word, sometimes there are some significant formatting errors that makes your essay look very strange. So type directly into this field or copy and paste from a simple text program so that there aren't any issues. One way that you can ensure that there aren't any formatting problems is by printing your application. The printed application is what medical schools see. So I would recommend that you print it, proofread it. Once you submit your application, you can't make changes to this part. So if you put any typos in there, they're going to stay there. If you're planning on applying to an MD PhD program, you'll be asked to write 2 additional essays. The first one will be about why you are pursuing that dual degree program, and then the second will be about your research experience, what you've done, what you've studied, what type of labs you've worked in. The 9th section is your standardized test section. So this is where you're going to talk about your MCAT. Again, our colleagues are the MCAT folks. The Association of American Medical Colleges does both the AMCAS application and the MCAT exam, so you don't need to send these scores to us because we get them as soon as they're available. If you are planning on taking an additional MCAT exam, then you'll indicate that in the AMCAS application. You'll say, I'm planning on taking the test on whatever date you plan to do that. So this is particularly important if you already have an MCAT score. For example, say that you took the AMCAT and it didn't go quite as well as you'd hoped, but you'd like to submit your AMCAS application in the early summer to get started with that review process and the verification process, but you plan to take the MCAT again that summer. You want to tell medical schools that you're going to take the MCAT again. Otherwise, they'll have no indication to wait for another score. They may evaluate your application or sort or screen your application based on your current score and not know to wait for a new one. So you don't want your application to be thrown out just because they didn't know that another score was coming. So make sure to keep this information updated. This is one of the things that you can change after you submit your application. So if you decide not to take it, that's fine. This is not a binding entry. It's just an update for medical schools. After you've completed the application, all of those sections, it's time to submit it. There are fees associated with the application, and they change depending on the year. However, they really don't change that much. So I can tell you for this current cycle, the AMCAS 2015, the processing fee is $160, and this fee includes one medical school designation. So if you'd like to apply to one school, then $160 is what you're going to pay. If you like to apply to additional schools, each school has a fee of $36. And again, that's for this year. I don't anticipate that it would change drastically next year, but just so you know, that information is updated on our website. This can get expensive, as on average students are applying to about 15 schools right now, so that definitely adds up quickly. Again, I'll talk about the fee assistance program towards the end of the presentation. It's also important to note that you don't have to pay for all of your school designations at once. You can submit your application and pay that $160 and get your application started in the verification queue. And every paycheck you get, add another couple designations if you'd like to go that way. You don't have to select all the schools you're going to apply to and pay that one lump sum up front. So, something to consider. Let's move on to what happens after you submit. The first thing you want to know about is verification. So again, this is where we look at your application and compare it line by line to what we see on your transcripts. It's important to note that your application doesn't enter that verification queue or the line for verification until we have both your application and all of your required official transcripts. So just because you click submit does not mean that you've entered the line. We need all your transcripts first, then it enters the line. Verification after you've entered the line generally takes about 6 weeks during our peak processing times, which again are in the early summer months. We do post updates on our verification timing on our Twitter feed, which is at AMCAS Info, so be sure to follow us and we'll post information like we are processing applications that were submitted on July 10th today. And if you submitted your application on July 12th, you'll have an indication of, oh, we'll probably be getting to your application soon. The second thing I wanted to talk to you about is making changes to your application. This, you can't make very many changes to many sections of the application. What you can change is your contact information. So this is where medical schools have the information to contact you. So if you change your email address or your mailing address, you want to change that in AMCAS so that they know how to reach you. Also, you can, again, change that MCAT score designation, and you can add more schools. If you meet someone who goes to any school, you can, and they really enjoy it, and you think, oh, maybe that's a good idea for me to apply, you can add more school designations as you go. Another thing we should talk about is criminal background checks. The AAMC runs background checks on all accepted applicants for participating schools, and we do this for 2 reasons. The first is to maintain the trust in the profession of medicine, and the second is really to help medical schools determine if you can attain the appropriate licensing that doctors need. If you graduate from medical school but can't get that license because of your background check, that would be very sad and kind of a waste of time for you. So that's why we do background checks. You'll be able to see the background check before we send it to med school, so if there's anything that's wrong with it or you don't agree, we can talk about it. Our vendor, Certified Screening, runs those checks, so you'll have time to review it before it goes out to med schools. There is no additional charge for this service. It's included in that processing fee. We are often asked if med schools can see the names and number of other schools that you've applied to, and the answer is no. They can never see the names and number of schools that you've applied to. However, on February of the application year, they will get the multiple acceptance report. This report shows them if they've accepted you, where else you've also been accepted. So they'll be able to tell if you've gotten other offers. On April 1st, we will release the National Acceptance Report, and this is a list of everyone in the application pool who has received an acceptance. However, going back to that original question of can they see the names and numbers of other schools I've just applied to, it's always going to be no. They may ask you that in their secondary for some reason or during the interview, but we do not provide that information to them. It's important to follow the application and acceptance protocols. Please check out our website for this one. It's just generally the rules of the game in terms of applications. All right, moving on to those resources I talked about. The first one I want to mention is the Fee Assistance Program. The AAMC offers this program because we believe that applying to medical school should not be a financial burden on anyone. If you qualify for this program, you will have a discounted MCAT registration, free MCAT prep materials, excuse me, application to up to 15 medical schools through AMCAS for free. We'll provide you the MSAR, which is the medical school application requirements, which allows you to compare medical schools and see which one offers a mission statement that you like better or different stats about their incoming classes. This is a really wonderful program, and I encourage you to check out the eligibility requirements and the benefits on our website. Again, it's listed up there on the screen. So please check that out. One important thing to note about this program is that it is not retroactive. So if you've already paid for your MCAT registration or submitted your AMCAS, we can't cut you a check for that amount. You're going to have to qualify for fee assistance and receive that waiver before you submit your application or register for your MCAT. All right, so the AAMC provides a bunch of resources for pre-med students. You can find them all on our website at aamc.org/students. We post a lot of updates to our Twitter feed and our Facebook page, so follow us at AAMC Pre-Med. We try to keep that pretty updated and current, so if you have any questions, we'll also answer pretty quickly on those feeds, so don't forget to follow us there. For AMCAS-specific questions, we have video tutorials to help you with the coursework section. We have a very thorough manual that will give you more details about entering complicated coursework if you've studied abroad or if you have questions about citizenship, etc. We provide some quick start guides and tips on applying from our website. And we also have our own Twitter feed, again, that we'll post those verification processing times on at AMCAS info. So with that kind of wraps up my part of the presentation. If you all have questions and things that I can offer you specifically, that's kind of what I'd like to move into next. So I guess we'll open it up for questions. Yes? So the question is, how do you know if you qualified for fee assistance? So the fee assistance program has its own application. It opens in January every year, and it lasts, we're changing the length of time it lasts. So starting in January 2015, this January, the program will last for 2 years. So you'll have the benefits for 2 years, and you'll apply when it opens. Then you'll be able to receive those eligibility benefits and everything that we offer to you. We correspond with you by email. You'll know if you received the award. Any other questions? Well, if not, you can come see me afterwards, and I guess the fair has shut down, but don't forget to connect with us on social media. We'll answer your questions as soon as we can on those feeds. Also, we have a really great contact center. If you give us a call with any question, we can talk to you about MCAT, we can talk to you about AMCAS or fee assistance program. I sit right next to the people who answer those phones, and they know a lot of things and are definitely willing to help you out. We don't want you to feel confused. We know this is a stressful process, and we are here for you. So give us a call. Don't hesitate and question whether or not what you're doing is correct. We can really quickly answer your questions, so don't hesitate to utilize those resources. Thanks for having me, and hope you enjoy the rest of the fair.